thank you so much for joining us in our session today. So hello to all of you spread out in your different institutions around the globe. Great to have some international representation. So we are 3 colleagues from the University of Brighton. We'll just quickly introduce ourselves. So my name is Lucy Chilvers. I'm a senior lecturer based in the Learning and Teaching Hub. Veena?
Hi, my name is Veena Raigangar. I'm senior lecturer and course lead for the BSc Physiotherapy course here at the University of Brighton.
And I'm Luke Middleton, and I'm a lecturer and academic skills tutor at the University of Brighton for Maths and Statistics.
And we're really excited to share with you some work that we've been doing together as a collaborative team, exploring the use of MS OneNote as an online or digital escape room. So it's been one of those projects that's kind of rapidly developed through a few conversations between myself and Veena, tackling the challenge of large group teaching, Veena and Luke talking about how to address supporting students in developing their quantitative statistics skills. And then the 3 of us kind of joining the dots and thinking about how we can use escape rooms to engage students actively in developing their stats skills on Veena's physiotherapy course. So it's been a really exciting collaboration to be working on with these guys. So just to, if we could move on to the next slide, Luke. We'll just talk you through what we're going to be doing in this session. So we're going to kick off by just thinking about the literature and what is currently out there in the research around the pedagogy of gaming for active learning, and particularly research into escape rooms in person and online. Veena's going to share a bit about the context of her physiotherapy degree and the kind of learning support needs of her students. And Luke's then going to outline his amazing design of a kind of a maze approach to escape rooms on OneNote. We're going to share some of the student and staff reflections of our pilot of this resource. And then excitingly, we've got our own smaller, more simplified escape room for you to have a go at, which is tailored around the topic of active learning for large groups. And then we're going to regroup and have some discussion around how this could be applied in lots of different contexts and what our next steps are in our own practice. So hopefully that sounds good. So in terms of literature, over the last 10 years, there's been a real growing interest in this idea of the gamification of learning. So drawing on the metaphors of games and play and how that can be used in the context of learning in higher education. So that could be just the metaphors, but it could actually also be using specific games. And then this other idea of serious play and serious games where you're using gaming, but in the kind of serious context of exploring, say, health issues for medical students. And then there's a wider kind of narrative of playful learning pedagogies as well. So some of you might be really familiar with this field of literature. It's quite new to myself, but it's a really exciting emerging area. There's a really useful systematic review that Veldkamp and colleagues did recently, homing in on this idea of escape rooms. You might well have had a go at one yourself for fun, just in other contexts. They're very kind of popular in Brighton as a kind of social activity, which you experience in person. And it's by no surprise that because of COVID, in the higher education setting, colleagues have then explored how to transfer this physical experience of an escape room into a digital version. So in that systematic review in literature, we can see already that there's a wide range of educational, teaching and research purposes for escape rooms, including recruiting students, helping students to get to know institutional services, looking at how to prepare and develop skills for students, improving learning skills and study behaviour, as well as developing knowledge in specific disciplinary areas. So drilling down into kind of the research into online escape rooms, there's been some research that shows that there's quite a lot of practice in the undergraduate context, but there's a bit of a gap in postgraduate learning, and particularly in the use of escape rooms for formative assessment. So that's quite an interesting area to explore further. And there was a recent study by Lechelli and Barnett who explored psychology students in a lecture context using an escape room to kind of engage with some troubling content, prepare for an assessment. And they then did a survey, explored students' perceptions of the formative assessment escape room. And students felt that it was a creative and novel approach. They particularly valued the peer interaction aspect of escape rooms, and they felt that there was something lost if you did it on an individual kind of basis. And then thirdly, they appreciated the extra challenge of kind of mastering the learning outcomes through going through a bit more of a sort of a challenging task of this escape room. So I think, just stepping back, essentially, this is bringing a bit of fun, a bit of engagement, a bit of competition and motivation for students, and really just actively engaging them in their subject in a new and creative way. So we're hoping to add to this literature. So we've got this small research pilot that we're kind of exploring student and staff perceptions of our kind of version of an escape room. So I believe I'm handing over to Veena now to share a bit more about the students that we're basing this research with.
Sure. Thank you, Lucy. Let me give you a bit of an introduction and a background. First of all, I think I just want to thank both the Skills Hub and the learning and teaching team at the university. This wouldn't have been possible if I didn't have the resources, the human resources, and people, like-minded people coming together. So if you are looking to set something up, I think your key is to have that kind of a team, and that team is very crucial for you to kind of get going. So one of the things that, where did this start off? Just excuse me. Sorry about that. We're just sort of in a room together. Sorry. So this kind of started off with a problem, and the problem was that we had a course and a module in the physiotherapy course, and this module was research methods in healthcare. Now, while I did see the students engaging quite intensively with the qualitative element, I didn't see the same engagement with the quantitative element. And that, to me, as a quantitative / qualitative researcher, was something that kind of was an opportunity to deliver some very targeted learning. Now, I had attended a session which was delivered by someone in our learning and teaching team, Alison, which was escape room based. And I thought, that's fun. That's interesting. That's something that I have kind of wanted to get through right to the very end. And so that was where I had a conversation with Lucy. And just sort of on the back of that, Luke was introduced as a new member joining the Skills Hub and providing statistical support. So it sort of fell, it was almost like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that fell into place. And so we got together and we thought, what could we do? And with the background of escape rooms, I spoke to Luke, who expressed an interest in game-based learning, saying, could we do something for stats? Could we introduce stats to the students via escape rooms or game-based learning? And that's where the idea sort of emerged. How we went about it is we met possibly about 3 or 4 times, and we tried to sort of look at it from a learning and teaching perspective, from a course perspective, and from a stats perspective or gaming perspective. And Luke will describe to you how he's made use of AI and the innovations he's kind of brought into that escape room. And then we sort of piloted it. At the moment, it's just in its sort of its version 1 sort of stage, and we kind of gave it to a very small group of students who volunteered to stay back and who were happy to share their feedback. We gave it to 2 groups of students, year 2s, level 5, and year 1s, level 4, just to see what the difference was, and as well to see what the challenges were with it. if we move on, he will describe to you the escape room, and then I will sort of come back and tell you. So again, why we try to navigate a difficult topic, possibly for consolidation, for teaching, for self-directed learning, multiple uses. And we piloted, like I mentioned, with the year ones and year twos. When was the question? Now, because we were kind of seeking volunteers, we tagged them at the end of a predefined lecture. So we had to kind of bide their time, and it was almost close to lunch break, but we made sure they had nothing after. So it wasn't sort of a high pressured scenario where they had to get to something. We ran them in the classroom, but these would have been ideal to be set up in a computer lab. And the resources I've discussed. And possibly after Luke goes through the escape room, I will take you through some of the things we thought about at the end. Luke, over to you.
Thanks, Veena. So I'm going to take you through the general design and methodology and approach that we took to the design of the statistics escape room, and give you kind of some tips and hints along the way that I found during the design. And yeah, so let's start. So basically, as Veena was saying, that we were facing a challenge in that many students that don't come from mathematical backgrounds were having trouble with quantitative research. They weren't engaging with statistics in the classroom, in conventional based learning, and it was then making them very apprehensive about taking on any type of quantitative research for further studies. And this is such a shame, because we live in a world now where data and is so readily available that it's a missed opportunity. And particularly in physiotherapy, Veena and I have discussed multiple occasions that the range of and just sheer amount of data that physiotherapists collect, and then it's stored in a kind of in a file, hidden away somewhere forever, never to be seen again. And it's just a real wasted opportunity. So the general design of the escape room that we piloted focused on three key parts, which was an introduction of probability using a conventional escape room method. And that is that students are confronted with a problem, they have to find the solution to move to the next phase. This is repeated again for descriptive statistics. But then when it comes to inferential statistics, we took a completely different approach. And actually, this approach is very novel in the escape room world. So haven't really seen this in literature so far. And it's the concept of a maze where students have multiple choices that they can make, but then they get instantaneous feedback if the wrong choice is selected. And I'll take you through that a little bit more now. So let's talk about the general design of an escape room. So with any escape room, it's really key that you embed the content in a really driven narrative. So you want to have the students absorb into the narrative so that they don't actually feel like they are directly doing the thing that they really don't want to learn anyway. So with statistics, it's about hiding it under the narrative, making them solve a bunch of puzzles so they don't even really realize that they're doing statistics, but they're learning a lot anyway. So as you can see here, that the escape room that we designed has all of the cliches present. So students get invited to an institute, and Professor Cypher is missing. Yeah, so I do apologize in advance. They are all present here. And yeah, so it's just about, it's intriguing them and wanting them to move on. So with any escape room, you need to kind of start with this basic layout. You need to set the scene, set the problem, but also show all of the important bits of information. So for example, in this case, I've shown here that all of the important information will be located within the tablet, and that's when links and stuff are provided for independent research. So it's really clear to have that first page so the students really understand what they're doing. So if I take you through now to the descriptive statistics section. So the general layout or approach that I took is that the scene would be set, but the narrative would be introduced at the beginning along with a clue. And then this is where I started to integrate the use of AI tools as well, because as you can see from this image down here, if you can use things like Adobe Firefly or DALL-E or general AI image generators, what you're able to do is really engage the student into your narrative through the use of visual aids. So you're really able to tell your story. So here the students have to solve a puzzle that's all about descriptive statistics. It's about finding the mean, median, mode, and range standard deviation of basically a set of data that is provided in the escape room. And in this kind of picture just helps them see that. So there's, some words written on some buttons, and it just really helps them to engage. And another important factor is that increasing the amount of activity that's available to them within the sheet itself. So you want to try and embed as much as you can within the sheet in terms of, so everything is located within the sheet and gives the sheet extra layers itself, or the room extra layers. So in this example, there's an Excel sheet embedded within there. So the students can just click on that and it opens and it brings them to an Excel sheet where they have to solve a bunch of descriptive statistics using Excel. And the reason why we took this approach is because one, students, again, are really apprehensive about using Excel. So it's a good way to demonstrate that use of that tool with them. But also, so many students get really worried about the actual calculation of descriptive statistics, when there should be an element of being taught that there are actually tools out there that will do the hard work for you. You just have to conceptually understand what they are doing. So this was a good way of doing that. And then the final thing that you can include is just by embedding things like hyperlinks that can take you to additional resources, or to the next section where you will be provided with a password to get you in. So now I'm going to take you to the maze, which is where the real novelty of what we've done here comes through. So basically, the idea of a maze is that you are generated with a challenge or a problem, and then you have two possible solutions. And rather than being taken through to a room where you either get the password right or wrong and it takes you in or it doesn't, this one will allow you to proceed even if you get the answer wrong, except it will take you to a different room where you will be given instantaneous feedback, which I'll show you in a moment. So, and you can kind of see again, so this particular design is all about really making the students understand inferential statistics from a conceptual point of view, because inferential statistics is something that's very challenging to teach mathematically anyway. So that's taking out of students that aren't even don't have that mathematical background, but so it's really been able to introduce it to them in a different way, an alternative way. And so if students can understand what the rules and the conceptions are around the test themselves, and that will give them a better understanding of when it's appropriate to use those tests on the data that they have. And that's all what this maze is all about, really. So it's taking them through that. So in this case, we have a small sample size, and then they're asked what test is appropriate. So then maybe a student clicks the Z test and they're taken through to an alternative part of the maze. And that's where you get here. So then you get the instantaneous on-the-spot feedback. And this is really about, it's allowing two things. So the first thing is, like I say, the instant feedback. So you're telling the student where they went wrong. Why isn't that the correct choice that they should make? The second thing is then you reframe the question with the same two options. So going through to this particular part of the escape room, the student once again has two options, the Z test or the T test, but the difference is that the challenge or the question that they've been set has now changed. So then it allows the students to go through and relearn and have another opportunity to kind of look a little bit deeper into those tests. So it's about that reinforcement learning as well. And that's the kind of real key fact with the maze that it allows you to do. So it does take a little bit of design, I have to say. And if I just go back a couple, you'll see all of the different levels of the maze here. So you can see that there's quite a few sections that include the maze. So it does take a little bit of designing, but it is worthwhile from that interest point of view, but also to allow an alternative method of giving feedback during an escape room. And I'm going to now hand you back over to Veena, who will go through some of the comments that we received with the pilot study.
So as you can imagine from what you saw, it was quite a Herculean task, and we did go back and forth, Luke and I, to look at sort of the maze and how it works, whether it's taking them to the right room and what happens back. And then we checked in with Lucy to see, does it all sort of pedagogically fit in? So again, I come back to a team approach, but in terms of student experience, we had student comments where they enjoyed the challenge and refresher, where we had a student, because the physiotherapy course has quite a few students who've completed another degree before they come on. a student who had done a prior degree felt that we could have increased the difficulty level of the questions, whereas it was quite onerous for someone who had come in fresh after college. So you will get, this was created in OneNote, and you will get that disparity in the classroom where you would have someone who would work through it very quickly, where some might sort of take their time. Another student said it was fun. I did not realize I was learning, which is what we are after: fun, engagement, active learning. Um, we had another comment, and this was around technical issues and teething issues. I mean, because it was a pilot, well, when Luke and I did this pilot, we did anticipate those to come in, and these were sort of around access. Can we access it through a link, through a hyperlink, through the desktop app? So we had to kind of go around a little bit to see what might be the best way. So those were some things that students wanted. As you saw from Luke's structure, that was quite a few escape rooms and mazes. So we kind of possibly have to come to an in between to see, could we have done and I mean, because it's created now, we can sort of break this up into 6 mini escape rooms. We can decide to do a teaching learning activity and then do one of the mini escape rooms. We might decide to teach the content and then give it as a pre or post sort of post the class as an exercise to the students, as well as it encourages teamwork. And so some of the students reported we gave it to them individually, but working in groups would be good, just because we wanted to get sort of more feedback. So again, working in groups would be great, and this would really work for large classrooms. I mean, we are looking at a cohort size of close to 80 students, and it becomes really hard to engage such a huge group of students. But with this, you can easily break them up into teams and groups and keep it as a timed task. So for one group of students, we put a huge timer on the screen, and it was a bit of a competition as to who can get free, or who can escape the quickest. And we had a little prize, a pair of gloves attached to it. So things like that, little incentives and rewards could be used. I did give it to a few colleagues of mine, and they kind of thought it must have been really difficult to design and would have taken a long time. And I believe to navigate that, it's something that cannot be done alone, and you do need a team who will kind of support it. But they did think it was very engaging, and they could not stop. Like I couldn't stop when I did my first one. I had to get to the end. I had to find the end. And so it was a bit like that. Also, I mean, so as not to frustrate others who are in the session together, you could even not time it at all and keep the pressure off and use it just as a learning experiment, and keep like 5 minutes, let's say, or 8 minutes for each room, and then give the code so it doesn't deter them. Because what we saw is, for some of the students who struggle, they kind of disengaged when they couldn't get on. They kind of said, that's it, I'm going to pack up and leave. So in order to kind of navigate that, that could be something that could be added in or considered. But overall, it was really positive, and they wanted more, and they wanted us to continue. So yeah, all in all, positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Veena. So there's lots more, we'd like to suggest about how this could be used, but we thought before we dive into that conversation, we'd give everyone a chance to test out an escape room. So Luke, if you wouldn't mind whizzing along to the next slide, I'm going to post a link to our very own escape room. Really hoping this works. If people have got a device, this will work particularly well in the OneNote app. So if you click on that link, and hopefully you can give us a thumbs up when you have successfully accessed it.
So to give a couple of more bits on then the feedback, so if you want to design your own room, so there was a couple of comments in the chat. So one of them was regarding how do you stop the students jumping to the next section? And the way that you can do that is in OneNote, it offers you the opportunity to password protect each section of, so each one of, so let me just jump back a little bit so I can just show you more clearly. So each one of these tabs has a password protection on it. And unless the student knows that password, they cannot unlock that section. And that's when it links to the, them solving the puzzles. And then in terms of the maze password, what I done is that each password was linked to what test they chose. So if they chose the test, whether it was right or wrong, that was the password to get into the next section. But then once they're in that section, they then kind of just continue on. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of how you stop that jumping around. And another factor that, just to kind of expand on what Veena was saying as well for the feedback, was that something that we encountered was that students do like to skim read. And what was happening was a lot, particularly on the Excel document, is that students weren't actually taking the time to read through all of the advice that I'd given them on how to input Excel formula into the sheet itself. So one thing I would advise is to keep your kind of descriptions as concise as possible and try and make them really clear. So make them colorful, make them pop, make sure the students are drawn to it if it's an important part of the study.
Thanks, Luke. That was seamless. We've got access.
Okay, perfect.
Panic over. Before we all dive into this, I just want to flag up a few key navigation things. So one is that when you go to the first page of the escape room, what you have to do is once you've solved the puzzle and you've got your password, you actively go and click on room 1. So that will open up room 1 and you click on the page or press enter to enter the passcode, and then that will open the room for you to then unlock the next puzzle. The passwords are case sensitive. So on each page, it will clearly say, whether it's all in capital letters or not. There should be 1 or 2 images on each page. If you can't see them, then you might want to try refreshing the page. And we should probably take about 10 minutes. So yep. I wondered if we see this as a bit of a competition. Everyone have a go now. And the first person or group back wins a virtual trophy and pat on the head. Does that sound good? And then we can kind of share some more reflections on how this could be sort of applied in people's different contexts. So you might want to be, whether you're doing this on your own or in groups, you might want to just mute your mics for a bit. I was thinking about playing Queen. I Want to Break Free in the background, but I haven't managed to get
Yeah, not a bad idea. I'll give it a go.
Or it could be Under Pressure, Lucy.
Yes. Well, we might need, depending on how long it takes.
But they'll be racking up their royalties if we start playing that, won't they?
For anyone who has either worked through it already or is just sort of mulling this over, you might want to start posting in the chat pane some ideas of how this could be used in teaching contexts, and particularly in that idea of formative assessments. Anyone got any different examples of how this could be applied? Some comments coming in on the chat pane. Would anyone like to sort of unmute and kind of give us some feedback on their experience of that escape room?
Thank you, Maria. I see you. Yeah, thank you, Maria, for your feedback. I see you've put your feedback in the chat. Thank you. Stuck on 3.
Sorry.
Shall I give you the answers?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'll be putting them in the chat pane for anyone who's struggling.
And Maria, feel free to get in touch if you want to discuss the use of this escape room with statistics. I'd be more than happy to discuss this with you.
Million, that would be great.
Yep. Thank you, Ellen. Ellen, for your feedback. Happy to know it's given you a lot of ideas. Yeah, it would work well with flipping, most definitely. It's quite a good one. Possibly just the first time around, you need to have the students go through it. So they like doing something simple like this before they do a bigger piece. So that's why we didn't keep the stats one. We kept something quite simple for the group to kind of go through.
Well, just to share a couple of other ideas, obviously, as we were saying, kind of this originated from our work at Brighton around supporting lecturers who are delivering, large lectures and have large, we have cohorts of 150, 200 students on some courses. And so, our wonderful colleague, Alison Willows, who I know is tuning in, inspired us with lots of different approaches for engaging large groups, but one of them being this idea of escape rooms. So one way is just to, kind of organise students into groups and allocate them before they even get to the lecture, and to kind of embed some of the lecture material into these challenges. So a much more engaging way than just listening to, some input from the front. Another thought is about any kind of pre-session reading or, videos that you want students to read or watch, making that much more investigative and giving them questions and puzzles to solve through engaging with that material, which then unlocks an answer to the next room. And, that could be done in one session, or it could be throughout a module, and each week could open access to the next room. And that, that could be a really fun, ongoing sense of competition throughout a whole module. You could align that with your tutorial groups or other formats of group work that you've got on your module. It does provide opportunity for small group work. I think that's definitely something that we've seen in the literature and from our own pilot, that students enjoy doing this together because it's fun. And like Luke's been saying, it kind of makes you forget about what you're actually doing, and the process becomes more at the forefront. And so it might be particularly useful to test out in modules with troublesome content, where students need to kind of almost just forget themselves and forget the kind of the challenge of the topic. Applications of skills and scenarios. So I think in some of the literature, this has been particularly used with, say, nursing students, or other kind of medical health professions, where they learn through scenarios and problem-based learning, and case studies. So particularly interesting to explore it more in those disciplines. And we would also suggest thinking about how you can maximise it as a resource across core modules. So, we've been encouraging Luke to think about, once we've got this resource, sort of finely tuned and perfected, how could a more generic stats escape room resource be created that could be embedded across any course with, basic level 4 stats? So it's also thinking in that way about it as a kind of an opportunity, and also making the more boring topics more interesting. So yeah,
Totally.
really interested to know if anyone else has got any other ideas of how it could be used. I'll just have a look in the chat pane.
Yeah, we have a lot of good feedback in the chat. So I'm glad, Janet, how it's absolutely ideal with big groups. Claire, I think it's almost like a multiple choice. You would be designing a multiple choice question with a larger case-based STEM, pretty much. You could look at it like that. But it's good to get a group of students to actually do it, or another group of students, just so you get to see whether it's at the right level. Claire, you're right about the time pressure, that you've got to kind of tell them read so that they don't skim, but in a way it's good practice. It makes them read, which is forced reading if they want to get there in time. We cannot see the individual results, as Luke has signposted. Oh, a page in Canva VLE. I'm not quite sure, Luke. That's for you. Do you know if it can be created in the Canva VLE?
I'm not sure. It's not something that I've tried. I just wanted to touch back onto Claire's question about that she finds it difficult to come up with alternative answers in a question. So this again is where you could utilize AI tools. So you could say, here's the question I want to ask. Here's the correct answer. Please come up with 3 alternative answers. So it's about utilizing the tools in the correct manner. And that is an ideal use of those particular tools.
Mm-hmm.
And the other, sorry.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I think thank you to the University of Brighton team. That's a good way. We set it as an assignment so they create their own escape rooms. It might be really a positive assignment and a different sort of assignment to do at the end of it. So most definitely. Go on, Luke. Sorry.
I know, it's just to touch on Maria's point about tracking individual results. So because you need to share the OneNote form in a way that, sorry, not form, but OneNote document that doesn't allow editing, you can't track where individuals are throughout the form. If you do allow editing, you can actually see it comes up with a little symbol that does show where the student is in the document. But if they edit that document, they're editing the kind of original document as well. So when you create these escape rooms, you need to make sure that you're sharing them as a view-only mode rather than an editing allowed mode.
Fab. So Luke and Veena, I'm wondering whether we should just kind of, oh, Flo, come on in. Yeah.
Could you not embed a Microsoft form into the notebook so that students, when they get to that room, they have to fill in the form, then you know they've reached that point? It's a bit of a roundabout way, but then you could track they get there.
Yeah, so you would get like a feedback based on them ticking a box saying completed this section or something like that. Yeah, so that is one method of doing it. Yeah.
Excellent.
Right,
That's
I
a
have a
great
question.
suggestion. Thanks,
Yeah,
Flo.
thank you.
Hello,
Hi there.
uh,
Hi,
Wan here. Yeah, I was wondering, since you've said this is a large group you have large groups in your class. So
Yes.
have you ever used this approach, meaning that you have divided them into groups and each group have their own escape room so that it can be played? I mean, they design it to the other members of the groups to be played. Or like dividing them into based on topics. So they design the escape room based on that topics and it's being played or by other groups in the class.
It's a good idea. I think it's a good suggestion that we could ask them to design it and have other people play their escape room. So, Grant, we haven't done that yet. And I think the steps forward are to kind of add more finesse to the current escape room and then actually deliver it to that large group or to that large class. It has still in its sort of pilot stages. It hasn't been run in a full 80 members class. It has been run in smaller groups of about 10 students. So it might work, but your suggestion, one of having students play their own escape rooms, might be a good way of learning as well. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it makes me think of that active learning strategy called Jigsaw that, there's kind of different, and that thing of dividing up content into chunks. And so some students specialize in one chunk of content and each group of students then kind of are teaching the rest of the class. So by the end of the activity, the whole class have covered all the topics. Juan's suggestion, those different escape rooms are how the students engage with those different topics. Dan, you've got a question or comment?
Yeah, no, that was really interesting. I did really enjoy that. What I was sort of thinking is how I would apply it to, say, my own sessions. Being a librarian, I don't see these people regularly. I see the students only have basically like an hour to impress upon the students what it is that I need to tell them. I suppose with this, because there are definitive kind of answers that you have to pre-program into it, is that something of a limitation, do you find? That, it doesn't encourage necessarily open discussion about a subject? I'm not sure.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a really good critique of it. Yeah,
100%.
and I think, this wouldn't be particularly useful in a session where you're wanting an exploratory debate and a whole range of perspectives and answers. And so, I think this does more naturally suit topics and sessions where you have more
dry content. I think more dry, heavy content that we want to make fun and interesting, I think, Dan. But you're absolutely right. I think there's a place for this, and I think there's a place for for group discussion and open text and open sort of responses. And the variety is what keeps students going, and sort of having the learning and teaching or assessment approach suited to the nature of that particular module. So I can see it totally with the statistics bit of my module, but it's not something I might use in a core module where I want them to think about different case scenarios of patients or clients. So it works with some, and it's for us to see as educators which we can use where. And I've seen, yeah, thank you. So I've seen some feedback in the chat about its use for staff training and for induction. So that's quite a good use as well.
That's actually, yeah, I thought for my own library inductions, those can sometimes be like a 45-minute presentation. And obviously there's a lot of information to give them, but this is, you know, students that have only just started. So they barely even have thought about going to the library at that point. So I could definitely see how constructing this, and you know, my colleagues could use the same thing as well. So it does reduce some staff time overall in terms of teaching. So I think this is, yeah, it's a really good idea. I'll have to think about how I can apply it to the induction stuff, because they do tend to look a bit bored when I'm talking to them about how many books they can borrow and how great ebooks are, you know.
Definitely. And it's making me think about, at Brighton, we've got our transition programme and induction programme we call it Belong at Brighton. And, you know, similar to the sort of action bound app where you get students to physically walk around a campus to orientate themselves, it could be useful for that kind of activity as well. An interesting comment from Juan, can also design with transdisciplinary courses. Yeah, possibilities are endless. Any final questions or comments people would like to make? So our next steps, Luke and Veena, we're going to continue piloting this with on the same modules in the next academic year and explore, you know, larger groups of students using it and getting more feedback, and we might hopefully get an ethical application in and be able to sort of explore this a bit further. And yeah, we should keep in touch through the Active Learning Network and share with each other any other ways of using OneNote, because it'd be great to have some other examples that we can share across the network. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Any final comments, Veena? I can't see you at the moment, but or Luke, want to say any final words?
Luke, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so I think that it's really kind of touching upon everything. I think that, you know, escape rooms are definitely best place for, you know, a right answer scenario. But I do think that the applications of this do, you know, extend way past statistics and mathematics. But yeah, no, I hope everybody enjoyed the talk. Yeah, and I don't know if you, Lucy or Veena, have any final comments at all?
So from my end, it's just going to be thank you, a big thank you for coming to this session. And we hope you enjoyed attending it as much as we enjoyed designing it and working together, and hope you can find a small place for it within your teaching. Thank you for sharing the resources you have in the chat and the ideas and the large escape rooms. And I think I'd like to echo what Lucy said, keep in touch. And if you have any best practices, I think the whole purpose of the network is to share best practice. And I think we're all looking at improving our own teaching, the teaching of our courses, but also the teaching of a collective. And I think that's the purpose for me as an educator. So thank you so much. Lucy, over to you to conclude.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Keep in touch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, cheerleaders. We wouldn't have been here without you guys. So thank you to all of you. And Flo, especially for putting us on spot.
Don't worry. No, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting. Okay. Stop recording here.